Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live, talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynn@pghcitypaper.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hello there, and welcome to the program. Oh, man. So, let's not start with Las Vegas. Let's not start with Puerto Rico, although my thoughts are with them. Not saying we won't talk about them. Let's come on home here to Congressman Tim Murphy and the story that was broken by the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by Paula Reed Ward. You may recall her as a guest on this show not too long ago because she had written the book about the horrific murder of the researcher in April. Why am I blanking on her name? At UPMC by her husband. And she wrote a book about it, Death by Cyanide, I believe. And that was an incredible hour. But Paula Reed Ward's got a pretty damn good front page story today, and I'm sure you probably know about it. And you probably also recall that Congressman Murphy acknowledged that he had an affair with a married woman. He too married, and that it has since broken off. But because her marriage dissolved and there is a divorce going on, Murphy's lover's husband's lawyers, getting all those possessives, Murphy's lover's husband's lawyer was able to get the judge to say, we would like to see these documents from the congressman's office, and we want access to emails and this kind of thing. And so, wow. One of the things that has been found is that the mistress went ballistic when she noted that the congressman had put an anti-abortion statement up on Facebook from his congressional account on Facebook. And she saw it and freaked. And here's what she wrote him. And you have zero issue posting your pro-life stance all over the place when you had no issue asking me to abort our unborn child just last week? And he says, in return, he responds to her, I get what you say about my March for Life messages. I've never written them. Staff does them. I read them and winced. I told staff, don't write any more. I will. This is the guy who the Family Research Council, which is about as loathsome an organization as there is, the Family Research Council lauds, praises to the skies for his anti-abortion stance and as well for his family values. But to me, the most stunning thing is the Post-Gazette also got their hands on a memo, an inter-office memo, written by Congressman Murphy's chief of staff. And I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. I'm going to give it a shot. Susan Masichik. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. I don't know. She used to work with the one of my favorite congresspeople, Representative Bob Barr, he who was the leading light behind the Defense of Marriage Act, who himself had been married something like 3 times. Anyway, Susan has been the chief of staff for Tim Murphy of these environs for years. And she wrote him a 3-page memo maybe it's 5, I don't know, outlining how he repeatedly subjects his staff to what she called a state of terror. You think you know Congressman Murphy, huh? Are we getting a picture here? Hypocrite, one, big time. He co-sponsored a bill that was voted on in the House just last night, I believe, right? In which he voted to restrict a woman's right to have an abortion after 20 weeks. Roe v. Wade says you can go further than that, but they're trying to, just nick and bite away at that woman's right. He co-sponsored this bill. And yet, when his mistress thought she was pregnant, the first thing he thought of is abort. Abort. For his mistress, yeah, I have an abortion. For you, even if it is determined that a baby you are carrying is not viable, under this bill that Murphy signed off on, a woman would have to carry that. It's not going to be a living baby, that fetus, till she goes into labor. And that is cruel. That is cruel. This has happened before in other places. Women in this situation that have gone into a Catholic hospital, for instance, where if they detect a heartbeat, even in an unviable fetus, they will not allow an abortion. They just send the woman home and say, God will take care of it. You just have to see it through and deliver it naturally. And sometimes when they do that, the woman suffers horribly, psychologically, physically. The baby is always a goner, no matter what. Excuse me, I digressed. I want to read to you what Murphy's chief of staff, for one thing, for a chief of staff to write this to the guy who is her boss shows that at a certain point, she doesn't care if he fires her. She might even be grateful. Because this is a no-holds-barred condemnation of him in specific detail. And the picture that emerges, and what she's telling him is behavior that she witnessed him conducting. Often behavior that involved her being absolutely in the car with him or as a witness. So he knows she's telling him the truth. And what she is telling him is that you, sir, are doing things that are, frankly, illegal. And you got to stop, because people cannot work in an environment like this. Every time you see Congressman Tim Murphy, and he seems like a reasonable man, a good man, I want you to remember what we're learning. He's a hypocrite. He's an adulterer. He's a two-faced harasser of his employees. He is a nightmare. Let me read some of this memo. The PG put some of it out there, but not the whole thing. There has got, and this is Susan wrote this to him on June 8th, his chief of staff. And she said, this is regarding office conduct and behavior and harassment and legal compliance. She's saying you're out of compliance with congressional rules here and federal rules and state rules and any rules you want to talk about. And she says this, there has been an ongoing and ever more pronounced pattern of sustained inappropriate behavior and engagement from the congressman. It's interesting, she doesn't say you. From the congressman to and with staff, impacting office operations in many ways. And then she says, such as the inability to hire and retain competent staff, abysmal office morale, overwhelming amount of redundant work products which you constantly reject, to name just a few. I have both witnessed and experienced and been exposed to hostile, erratic, unstable, angry, aggressive, and abusive behavior from the congressman. The events leading up to and through Monday, June 5th, has prompted this document in which I am formally informing you of one particular event as a demonstration of the office's vulnerability to yet more legal action as a result of your behavior. The fact that she says yet more legal action suggests that he has been sued by former employees. Having been prevented last evening from either speaking to you personally or communicating over the phone, this memo is being written to detail the growing problem and to request a complete cessation of such behavior, effective immediately. Should there not be cessation, I am obligated as Chief of Staff and as your immediate subordinate to pursue further steps for recourse, both for me and for the office staff. So she's saying, I'm right, I'm putting it out here for you, buddy. And if you don't stop this behavior, I will sue you. I will help other people sue you. And we're going to win. This guy sounds like such a monster after you read this thing. And when you think of his public persona, the wise psychologist, always concerned with mental health issues, always seemingly a little less crazy than some of the other Republican members of the House. She headlines this segment, Events from June 2nd and June 5th. You have been repeatedly and angrily demanding that I and other D.C. staff go to the district to prep you for district meetings and to train the constant influx of new staff and to attend district meetings, knowing how much work goes into preparing you and the lack of attention you pay to the work that are the work products that are labored over by your staff. I have sought to not expose brand new staff to what routinely results in a very stressful and angry prep time with you. On Friday, you angrily demanded that I have been blocking your new ID. I don't know what an ID would be. It's a position. It's a person. From going to the district, and that you wanted him there to assist you. Given the fact that he has only been on board for a mere 3 weeks, against my better judgment, I relented and arranged the travel to include myself, knowing without a doubt that it would result in fallout without me there. Staff were panicked because you sent an overwhelming amount of emails demanding a mountain of information. Incessantly, staff worked over the weekend and around the clock, and come Monday, your anger was evident first thing through a litany of emails, texts, and phone calls, many of which you would criticize me and then hang up. With a flight delayed, your anger grew. With a rental car pickup delayed, you were enraged by the time you entered the district office in Mount Lebanon. You were storming around as we walked in and as we sat down for the prep, having just arrived literally moments ago. You started in on the ID, verbally abusing him, harassing him, chastising him, and criticizing all his work. You called many of the work products that he literally gave up his weekend to provide as useless. You pushed other documents off the table onto the floor. Then you got angry and demanded we find the documents that you had just thrown on the ground. If this doesn't sound like an abuser, I'd like to know what does. All the staff were scared of you. I was scared of you. And I knew the damage had been done because everyone in the office was in a state of terror, trying to respond to all your demands. And no matter what was given to you, your response was anger. And before we could even get a word out of our mouths, you started speaking over us. As we proceeded to the town hall meeting, you continued to complain. A staff member came to me and voiced his concerns about the treatment he was receiving. I said that in no way was I disappointed by his work and that he had produced very good material. I also said he shouldn't worry about your behavior because I don't measure staff performance by your criticisms, especially when I know firsthand the good work being produced. At the town hall meeting, your incessant demands continued over text messages. The hostility and insults were frightening, with a frequent demand for information to be delivered now, in all caps, which was a complete impossibility due to the fact that the poor guy doesn't have years of institutional knowledge. He's been with us for 3 weeks. You also criticize his information as incorrect when in fact it was not. And listen to this part. As we drove to the next event, your driving was dangerous and erratic. You were reading your iPad, playing YouTube videos, and all this during a torrential downpour. He's driving and playing YouTube videos and reading his iPad. I frequently ask you to keep your eyes on the road and to stop texting and using your iPad, particularly after you went out of the driving lanes onto the road grids. I feared for my life. I was very shaken over your lack of attention on the highway through this torrential storm, and your staff had the same reaction. I repeatedly, at least 15 times, begged you to stop texting, and you not only dismissed my request, but you further told me to get into the back seat because you didn't want me up front complaining. It goes on and on and on about how she cannot keep staff, about, listen to this. She reminds him, we have had near 100% turnover within 1 year's time. You think Trump has trouble holding people? Every single person but her bailed on him in a year. She said, this is unprecedented. We've lost over 100 staff since I first came into your office. The reason is because of strong dissatisfaction. Congressman, the unreasonable expectations and ongoing criticisms that you deliver and the overall dysfunction of the office, I have reached a place where I'm doing every task and training new staff who I know are going to leave because of the way they're treated. Meanwhile, I'm being overruled and unable to do anything with planning because it's always your whims of the moment. You change minute to minute. It is unsustainable. It cannot continue. Staff do not want to work with you directly, and when they do, they receive harassing hostility and soon seek employment elsewhere. Because of the reputation of your difficult behavior, I can't even recruit staff But most importantly, it is all in violation of our own office manual, in violation of the Congressional Accountability Act, and in violation of the EEOC definition of harassment. And then she goes and tries to school him on all of that. It is amazing. Everybody thinks this guy's going to get reelected in 2018. Everybody said he's one of those safe gerrymandered districts. He's a shoo-in. There are a number of Democrats who have said they want to run against him, and I'll tell you, I'm aware of a few of them, and they are an impressive bunch. But the people who know how this works know that he'll be reelected. Really? Really? Well, this absolutely dovetails with what I was saying yesterday. We're the enemy. Don't be pointing fingers that away and this away. It's us, the citizenry. We are the ones who have allowed this to happen, who continue to allow this level of outrageous behavior, of hypocrisy, of do what I say, not what I do. I'm going to set rules for you guys, not for me. It's like Santorum. Remember Rick Santorum in the Senate? Fiercely trying to cap how much money you could get if you sued for malpractice, let's say, a medical malpractice suit. He wanted to cap that baby. And as he's doing that, he's suing a doctor that his wife had gone to, and he's asking for, one forgets, but he's asking for 5-10 times the amount that he says the rest of us should never be able to get to. These reprehensible hypocrites. Michael from the Cynic says, Dr. Tim, let's not forget his weird spackled makeup. You know, I've always said, because the first time I saw him, I think I was I still at WTAE? I suppose I was. And I bumped into him in the hall. And he had makeup on. He'd probably been in a television interview or something. And he looked like a cadaver. And I remember thinking, God, who did that to you? You look like a walking stiff. And every time I've seen him since, he still looks that way to me. He looks like if you laid him down on his back, and you looked over him, he looks like the kind of guy that, you know, at a funeral people look at and they come away and they say, oh, he looks so nice. They did a good job. Denise writes, am I reading this wrong? Or did Murphy not admit to another affair in 2008 with someone named Susan? I don't know what you're reading. I think, I don't know. I know the chief of staff is named Susan. The lover is named Shannon. Shannon Edwards, a forensic psychologist who was married and is now being divorced from I think a sports medicine doctor. I don't know. So you give me what you're wondering about. And this is a quote from the memo. While I was belittled and berated, and while my confidence was at its nadir, I decided to do some things to demonstrate my own courage. No, this is Murphy. That is a thing that Murphy wrote to his lover. Unless I'm mistaken, but I believe so. Here, I know exactly where it is. Yeah. Murphy said in a November 27th email to Ms. Edwards, that's the lover. So he emailed her and said, Oh. Yeah. So he's emailing her, his lover, and telling her that he fell into a relationship with a woman named Susan when his daughter left for college. So he's admitting to an affair. He's admitting an affair to his mistress. And then he says this, I did not see its toxicity until I was months into it. He went on to say, I lacked confidence to break it off. And then he said, I decided on a long-term plan to try to stabilize my life and extricate myself from that relationship by building my strength in other areas. While I was belittled and berated, I don't know from where, and while my confidence was at its nadir, I decided to do some things to demonstrate my own courage. And he tells her that's when he decided to join the Navy Reserves. He wanted, what? He sounds like a basket case to me. I decided to do something to demonstrate my own courage. It was all optics. I'm going to be a military guy. According to military records, he was commissioned on January 1, 2009, served in the Operational Health Support Unit at Walter Reed until April of this year. He submitted his retirement on September 11th of this year and received an honorable discharge. I guess he thinks his courage has now been demonstrated. I don't know. What a jerk. You know, here again, if people want to be screwing around, it's none of my business. But when they're screwing around and then telling the rest of us how to live our lives, he's putting himself in women's wombs and into decisions that should be made solely by a woman and her partner. It's beyond belief to me. Okay, let me get some more of your emails in here. Chuck writes, Tim Murphy walked in our Community Day parade this past August. They didn't announce in advance that he would be participating in the parade, likely because they didn't want any protesters. Regardless, in just the 50 yards or so he walked in front of me, I heard a number of angry shouts at him. I nearly didn't recognize him. He looked sickly, carrying his little bag of candy as he threw Clark bars to the kids. Also, not sure if you saw, but in yesterday's PG, there was a good article about gerrymandering and how there are new judicial tests for determining inappropriate redistricting, so maybe there's some hope. Well, we'll get to that because I'm sure, again, you know that the U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments yesterday in a case that, if is found properly in a 5-4, will throw out how Scott Walker in Wisconsin and his henchmen unconstitutionally gerrymandered that state to keep power in perpetuity in the Republican Party. I mean, as a native of Wisconsin, as somebody who remembers how proud I used to be about the political environment there, it was so squeaky clean, Wisconsin government, that when I first came to Pittsburgh, I was stunned by the level of corruption that nobody even noticed. I mean, just the way things were done here, and nobody suggested that there was anything wrong with the way things were done. And in Wisconsin, people would have been perp walked. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. I covered state government there. The biggest scandal, and it was big for Wisconsin, was when it was uncovered that legislators were using their telephones in their offices, state offices, to make personal long-distance calls. This was huge. People were stunned. So you see why I was so blown away when I came here. But Scott Walker came to town. And I watched this state that was the birthplace of the Progressive Party, of so much progressive legislation, the first state to have unemployment compensation, the first state to... It was out there on environmentalism, everything. And I was so proud I lived in this progressive state. And Scott Walker, I don't know how he did it. How did he do it? Scott Walker and Rush Limbaugh and Fox News turned my state into a nightmare. Okay. Susie writes, I used to be a TV producer at a hospital where Tim Murphy worked. Every time he saw me with any type of camera, he would yell, "Hey, Susie, you better get my good side." Ugh. You know, I was schooled by a senator about camera angles very early in my career. And again, I'm back in Wisconsin, and it was a senator who became very famous, Senator William Proxmire. He was so squeaky clean that he never took a cent. He never raised a penny. He never had a war chest. I'm not kidding you. All he ever did was manage to shake everybody's hand in the entire state more than once. I personally, before I became a reporter, had probably shaken his hand twice. He was at every Packer game. You couldn't walk to your seat without having to say, "Hey, Senator, how you doing? Hey, Senator, how you doing?" He was always everywhere. He was so squeaky clean, it was amazing. He had something called the Golden Fleece Awards, where he would point out the way Congress was fleecing the taxpayer. And the first time I interviewed him, and my photographer was setting up, I was sitting across from him, and I was regaling him with stories of all the times he'd shaken my hand. He looks at where the camera is. He says, "Hey, wait a minute. He said, that camera has got to, either I got to stand up or that camera's got to go down. He said, I don't want a camera pointing down on me. Because it made, think about it, of course. You want the camera pointing up at you so you look big and important. You never want it coming down on you, which diminishes you. I'd never thought of something like that. So very early in my TV career, he schooled me about the importance of being aware of what cameras do. Okay, I will do that. All right, so I just, he has always, Murphy, made my skin crawl. And for the first time, I'm sorry, I can't help but hope that they're, that was before they gerrymandered it, that was a Democratic district. Doug Walgren was the last Democrat in that district. A good guy. I don't know how effective he was. I know he was a good guy. When he was at the White House, he saw that famous painting of John F. Kennedy hanging in a hall where he's looking down and looking contemplative, thoughtful. You'd know it if you saw it. And he took a picture of that, and he once gave me a copy of the picture that he had framed out of the blue. He was a nice guy. He was knocked off by none other than Rick Santorum. And that's how Rick Santorum came into our lives. And that district, been Republican ever since. And then the guys in Harrisburg really made sure they gerrymandered it to a T. But maybe there's a chance. So everybody who saw the oral arguments about gerrymandering yesterday saw that it was the usual split. The Republican justices were siding with Scott Walker because the law aside, what the hell's wrong with Republicans winning all the time? I like it. But God bless him, Justice Kennedy, the only one who seems capable of independent thought, clearly showed his discomfort, and people are hoping that he'll make it a 5-4 ruling in the right direction. I mean, understand that the way these guys are gerrymandering districts, they're depriving many people of their vote. It really is a constitutional issue of, under the 14th Amendment, of a guarantee of equal protection under the law. If you're a Democrat living in certain districts in this state, your vote really doesn't count. If you're a Republican living in another district, your vote counts maybe twice as much or 1.5 times as much. They have figured out through using algorithms, I'm so sick of that word, and polling data and technology and map makers, they can literally figure out how to win power, how to win control, but not win the popular vote. Republicans now have done that twice with the presidency, right? I mean, in very recent history. Donald Trump didn't win the popular vote. More Americans voted for Hillary Clinton. The same was true of George W. Bush and Al Gore. And in Wisconsin now, Democrats, let me see, I've got the stats here somewhere. Democrats got 51% of the vote. We're talking the state assembly. 51% of the vote. They got 39 of the 99 seats. They get most of the vote. They end up as the minority party. Because it's all in where you draw the lines. The Republicans so skillfully drew their maps that they won 60 of the seats with less than 50% of the vote, 48% of the vote. If that's not unconstitutional, then I'd like to know what is. The court has said it's unconstitutional to gerrymander districts to keep black people from having their voices heard. So you can't do it racially. And then why can't you do it? They've never said you can't do it to keep partisan gerrymandering from being illegal. A 3-judge court in Wisconsin found that it was unconstitutional. The state appealed it to the Supreme Court, where the oral arguments were heard, and anyway, a decision is not expected until June. And if they come down on the right side, that's going to spur a lot of additional suits all over the country. And I would assume one here as well. Okay. So before we get to, I know what's always on our mind. Okay, I cannot get over it. I'll just got to say this about Trump in Puerto Rico. Of all the craziness, the sight of him throwing those paper towels at people in the audience was the most discordant image I think I've ever seen. I mean, he always does things which make you recoil and make you wince because they're inappropriate, because they're unpresidential. He was supposed to be there to comfort and to witness. And he was having fun. Hey, want a paper towel? Here. It was like he was the pirate parrot in, the seventh inning stretch, shooting T-shirts and hot dogs into the crowd. Unbelievable. Did you see him talking to one of the people who, have lost so much? And he said something like, blah, 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 and then he said, have a good time. That's what he said. Have a good time. What? He does not know how to deal with human beings. He's not there. Did you ever see the video of him shaking Melania's hand after she introduced him at an event? It is so, again, jarring because you realize as he comes up to the podium and shakes her hand that you've never seen anything like that. That if a spouse introduces a spouse to speak, they might come up and give him a hug, a pat on the back, thanks, dear, or a kiss or whatever. But he came up to her and shook her hand. His wife. He just has not a clue. And then, always stuck with numbers, superlatives. He suggested that what happened in Puerto Rico was not a real catastrophe. He said, didn't he say, I hate to, he said, Katrina, now there was a real catastrophe. That's what he said. Well, you had hundreds. Yeah, in fact, over 1,000 people dead. And he was saying to them, you should be proud. You should be proud that not as many of you died. He said, so he was saying, you only had 16 dead. It's like, let's have a party. By the time he'd boarded Air Force One to fly off, the 16 number had more than doubled, by the way. And it will again. He only understands the numbers. Who came out on top? Who didn't? God, he is vile. He is vile. Margaret's telling me Tillerson is about to make a statement. God, I hope he's resigning. Word has it that word got out that he, at a meeting, called Trump a moron. The Secretary of State called the president a moron. And I wonder if that's led to any... there's a lot of tension there. I don't know that he'll resign. I don't know. It could just be something, I don't know. Margaret says, I have your audio, but I do not have video. Oh, wait. Nobody else is telling me that. Thomas says, the episode of Vice News Tonight on HBO on September 22nd is about gerrymandering. The computer program that is used is as easy as point and click, and blues turn red over an entire state. My mouth fell open as I watched. But see, Democrats don't vote in these boring midterm elections where state legislatures get decided who controls them. Our people don't vote. And so the Republicans control the vast majority of state legislatures, and they can make blue turn red with a little click. And the only possibility of stopping that is with a Supreme Court that does the right thing. And as we know, we've got a Supreme Court that often does not. And if Trump stays in office and he has an opportunity to put another judge on the court, we will have totally lost all three branches of government. They will be in the hands of these hypocrites, these self-serving believers in what? Greed and power. My contempt knows no bounds. Gee, if I were a grieving victim in Nevada, I sure would be thrilled that the great empathetic comforter-in-chief is heading my way now. Incredible. So I want to point something out that you may not have seen. Did you hear me say so? I don't know if you recall, might have been about 2-3 years ago, maybe more, that the city of Toledo, Ohio, had to shut down its city water system totally for 3 days because they get their water from one of the Great Lakes, Lake Erie, and there had been this growth of algae. It's called a bloom that was filled with toxins that made their drinking water poisonous. Almost 3 million people get their drinking water from Lake Erie. And if you were to fly over Lake Erie today, you would see something that looked more like a meadow than a body of water. It ain't blue, I'll tell you that. It's green. Totally green. There's a huge, again, algae bloom right where Toledo is, and out into Maumee and all those other places right up there. And it is It's covering more than 700 square miles. This is becoming an increasing problem, but because we have government that doesn't do anything anymore, we're paying no attention. This is a problem that if we had somebody at the head of the Environmental Protection Agency actually concerned with environmental protection, they'd be all over this. My guess is our EPA secretary is probably now on some oil company's jet heading off to a golf tournament with a bunch of polluters. Everybody knows why the algae is blooming in Lake Erie. It's from runoff that comes from all that farmland around the lake and from the fertilizers that agribusiness is now using to grow our food. And that fertilizer makes the algae bloom, and dangerous levels of a toxin are created. Let me tell you, if you got a boat, you're not going boating, you're not going swimming, you ain't drinking the water. All those, anytime you have waterfront, right? What's the main industry? Tourism. Shuts it down. The hit to the economy is huge. It says that this lime green skin on the lake surface is so thick you could write your name in it. Here, a little climate change thing aspect too. The storms that hit that upper Midwestern-y region, I think, have become more intense in recent years. And the more intense rainfall and storms is creating more runoff into the lake. Something's really wrong here. But the EPA, as currently constituted, will not lift a finger. Will not lift a finger. The kinds of fertilizers we use here are outlawed in every other civilized country in the world. We do not belong in the civilized countries of the world. That's not where we currently are positioned. Henry Tillerson, he writes, is one person in that administration who makes me feel just a little bit more secure. Tillerson ain't it for me. I mean, I know he's not insane. I guess that's all. We take comfort in knowing, well, at least the Secretary of State is not insane. No, he's just a former chief of Exxon who's going to be more concerned again with the oil. The one that I take some comfort in is Mattis, Secretary of Defense. Do you remember that horrific cabinet meeting where everyone went around? They went around the cabinet table. These are powerful men, and they all had to tell their dear leader how wonderful he was. Do you remember that? Cringifying thing. And Mattis didn't do it. He said, I'm proud to serve with these wonderful, he went underneath, not above, these wonderful men and women behind me or something. He refused. He was the only one. And he regularly just doesn't do what Trump says he's going to, and this and that. And Mattis tells all the people behind him, just pay no attention to the moron, the raving moron. At least Tillerson, writes Henry, seems like he's smart. If he's so smart, why'd he take the job? Seems like he's smart, and he seems even more intelligent now that I know he thinks Trump's a moron. Yeah, but even a moron would recognize Trump is a moron. Also, we are learning new terms such as cracking and packing as we learn about gerrymandering. Cracking is breaking a district to lessen a party's voting power. And packing is restructuring the district to further the part. You pack the vote, right? Or you crack the vote, which is to say, in real English, you either make some voters their vote more powerful and other voters' votes less meaningful, less powerful. And guys, that's what they're doing, and it's been working. And I have to tell you, if that is not a violation of the Constitution's equal protection under our law, then I'd like to know what the hell is. You know, I have voted in every election. I vote religiously. And naively, I always assume my vote's going to be counted. That's why I vote. And I now know that it's possible that my vote in the last election might have been invalidated through gerrymandering, might have been invalidated through Russian hacking. You can't pretend to have a democracy if the people don't think their votes count. And the people in power are busy making sure they don't. Gerrymandering, Henry says, is a science. And if we had Democratic leadership, we wouldn't be behind the 8 ball on this. Yeah. Well, Margaret's telling me I got the quote not totally right. Tillerson called Trump a fucking moron. All right. Okay, guys. Oh, wait. I'll get Dorothy in. She just came in. Dorothy says, I can fix this gerrymandering in one fell swoop. Make each county a district. How many counties does Pennsylvania have? Oh, who knows? 70-something. I think it's 70-something. I wonder if you could do that. No, because I think the Constitution says you have to do it proportionally. Districts have to be proportional by the Constitution so that each representative is representing the same number of people. Pennsylvania has 67 counties, but some of them, the population is minimal because they're rural, and some, like Philadelphia County, my God. So you can't have one guy representing Philly and another guy representing, Tioga, and expect that there again there's not equal protection. So Dorothy, your fell swoop, it don't work. All right, guys, thanks a lot. Appreciate you being here. Were you here? Yeah. We didn't get a call today. Thought I was talking a lot. Jeez. I hope somebody calls me tomorrow. I like talking to you. Okay? Madison Tillerson are fighting? Margaret just said, all right, you guys, stop giving me these little things. I'm going to go on Twitter myself and find out what's going on. Okay? Thank you. Have a good one. Goodbye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.